And I wrote this book because of a conversation that I had with one of my best friends. We were sitting in a tapas bar in Washington, D.C., and I'm vegetarian, and he's super confused that I love this tapas bar because tapas is not generally a vegetarian-friendly food. And we were talking about the waves of hate that were sweeping the country. This was in the summer of 2016, and we were just sort of stunned, right, by what we were seeing around us. Or he was stunned, and he's white, and he's Southern, and I think he sort of thought that having grown up in such a place, right, like he would know how bad it could get, and it was just bad beyond his imagining. And in some ways, it wasn't bad beyond my imagining. It was as if what I was seeing was what I had always sort of wondered if that was what was percolating beneath the surface. Like every now and then something would happen and I would be like, oh, right? So I felt like I was getting like confirmation of something that I had always been afraid of. And he felt like his world was turning into a nightmare. And we were talking about that some. And I was actually saying that for me, I don't mean to say that I wanted what was happening or anything like that, but there was actually a comfort of feeling less crazy in having the sort of reality revealed. And it was making me feel a little bit more sane, as much as it was just the most horrible. It was as if it was having your worst assumptions confirmed, right? And now when I think that I thought the summer of 2016 was my worst assumptions, I wonder at the naivete, right? Like it just got worse and worse and worse. But he was asking me what it was like as a person of color to be living with that. And I said to him that, well, I found the blatant bigotry horrifying and I found it terrifying. It wasn't the kind of hatred that hurts me. Right? In the end, people who I don't know saying really horrible things on the television, it terrifies me, it frightens me, it fills me with dismay and disgust for the world. But I've always known that those people didn't think that I was fully human as a brown woman, so it doesn't hurt me. What hurts me is the sort of casual racism of the people who love me. And all of a sudden I had a title. And shortly thereafter, I would have a title essay about one of the biggest fights that he and I ever had. Because what happened in that moment, and I write about this in the final essay, which I'm actually not going to read. I'm just going to tell you the story because I'm taking advice from that bookseller friend. So I wrote out you can tell I'm reading it, but I wrote out a different version so that you can still get something out of reading the book, right? That what came out of that conversation was an essay about the biggest fight that he and I ever had, or at least one of them, because he said to me, "Are you talking about me when you say that?" And the thing is that I hadn't really been talking about him until he asked the question, right? I had been thinking about every single moment that one of my white relatives said something that demonstrated that they had no idea what it was like to be me. I was thinking about every single moment that one of my Indian relatives revealed to me that I was fundamentally a disappointment to them for not being Indian enough when they had never actually taught me what it would be or how to be that Indian, right? It's not like I had rejected the lesson. Had never gotten the lesson, right? No one had given me the memo. And so I was thinking about all of those moments, but when he asked me that question, I couldn't say no to him. Because we had had a horrible fight once that I write about in the book, and it had been a fight about TSA. I had been going to visit him, and I had been searched by TSA on my way, and I arrived at his house really traumatized by the extremely invasive search. And he wanted me to understand that TSA searching me like that was to make people safer. That since I am not a terrorist, and I know that I'm not a terrorist, and I know that when they go through my luggage in fine-grained detail and investigate bodily orifices that I was certainly not expecting to have anyone check out at the airport, that they're doing it to make the airplane safer for everyone, including me. And therefore, I should understand that this is part of what we do to get a safer society. And we had a horrible fight. We had an absolutely horrible fight, and I almost got on an airplane and went home, and I was visiting him in Europe. It would have been quite the thing to go home. And I didn't, and we stuck through it, and we had sort of a relatively good visit, and we just sort of buried it, right? We buried the entire thing. We buried the anger. We just sort of repressed and moved on, and actually continued to have a really lovely friendship. And then 7 years later, I said this thing, and all of a sudden he knew that I had to be talking about him.